The solo experience in Warlord's Ruin is not an easy one, but it is a much shorter one than Ghosts of the Deep. Today we'll be breaking down strategies and loadouts for all classes so that you can collect that solo flawless emblem when Bungie fixes the Triumph. I don't plan on talking about Season of the Wish seasonal perks too much, since I like these guides to not need to rely on the artifact. But considering that this season has both Solo Operative, which is just a flat 15% damage boost when you're solo, and From Whence It Came, which increases ability damage to Taken and Scorn, I would really recommend you take advantage of these while you can, and I feel like I say this every time I put out a solo dungeon video. Also, while the seasonal artifact gives many solar benefits, namely Revitalizing Blast, which debuffs bosses when you hit them with a solar ability, I don't feel like they are vital to success. But they really help, so use it while you can. Getting Radiant and holding onto it for long periods of time is already a pretty core component of several solar builds, so while Flint Striker is very convenient and easy, if you happen to be watching outside of Season of the Wish, I'm sure the seasonal artifact, if it still exists, I guess, will still have some good stuff to utilize. Note that clips of me on Titan have the full suite of artifact perks enabled in the footage, so my damage is a bit higher than it normally would be, and my Hunter had Revitalizing Blast on during the final boss. On my Warlock run, I used literally no seasonal perks. For those running and playing all three classes and want to know what the easiest class is, I'm just going to say the class that you use the most or have the most familiarity with. For example, I am a terrible Warlock, and even though supposedly Warlock is easier than Hunter, I just don't have good Warlock instincts. I also didn't like Warlock because of their lack of damage super, even though Well of Radiance is really good for other reasons. The core builds you'll likely be using are the following. For Titans, it's going to be Strand with Syntheseps for the first boss, and Solar Titan with Syntheseps with a Pyrogale swap when appropriate on the second boss. Bonk Titan doesn't rely on seasonal perks at all, but again, during Season of the Wish, take advantage. Warlocks, I was on Sunbracers only for the final boss. I used Karnstein on boss 1 and 2 because it felt cumbersome trying to activate the whole Sunbracer restoration combo and keeping it active on the first two bosses. Karnstein was much simpler and easier to keep active, but you do lose the power of Sunbracers. But it's not like you're using Sunbracers for single target boss damage outside of the final encounter. Outside of Season of the Wish, spoilers, you're still likely to use this build in some capacity unless something else comes along, or Sunbracers gets a nerf or something happens. The main combo for Sunbracers for the whole restoration thing is the same as it was for my Ghost of the Deep video. Consume your grenade for heat rises, melee kill something to activate Sunbracers, throw grenades, and then dive bomb heal to heal yourself to get restoration rolling, and then continue to kill stuff with your grenades and your whatever else you're using to stack your restoration timer up and keep it rolling forever. Hunters. I actually used 3 different builds for each encounter. The first boss was a pure arc melee build with tractor cannon and a 1-2 punch shotgun melee setup. The second boss was arc melee again, but this time with Lucky Pants and Malfeasance as the main damage dealers. And the final boss I rotated to Solar with the newly buffed Celestial Nighthawk and Gunpowder Gamble in order to AoE key targets down in the fight. Could you do Solar all the way through? Absolutely. Could you do arc all the way through? Absolutely. Just find what works best for you. The Solar build is self-sustaining and does not require any seasonal artifact perks, but again, you will see some seasonal perks active in some of the footage. The Arc build is also self-sustaining, Lethal Current plus Flow State to stack Combination Blow ×3, and then Dodge and Melee to murder everything in sight. Nothing really new if you're familiar with this build. To anyone running Solar, be warned. There is still a bug with Restoration and Fire Sprite pickups. If you pick up a Fire Sprite while you have Restoration active and you're using Ember of Mercy, it will reset your timer back down to the original 3-second timer. It will not refresh your timer back up to probably 12 seconds. This will lead to deaths. I promise it will. Hopefully Bungie fixes this at some point soon, but it's been a while, so don't get your hopes up. What I did for Hunter instead, for example, was run without Ember of Mercy, and I just threw a healing grenade on myself right away and then killed stuff to keep it refreshed. The Fire Sprite bug was that annoying, and it was killing me that often. Regardless, all solar builds should have on things that extend the duration of your restoration and radiant. You need to be able to kill with a solar weapon and refresh those buffs constantly, especially in the final fight. Empyrean, torches, I was running ashes with Dragon's Breath and then like singeing or something. Fill in the blank with whatever. Now, I'm going to make some assumptions about you, the viewer, and the first one is that you know how the dungeon works. The other assumption is that you have some level of expertise with the game with regards to a build or build crafting and or experience in a solo dungeon environment in more recent dungeons. Duality, Spire, Ghosts. The last 3 dungeons have all been difficult enough that you need to know how to build craft and actually play said build. If the only solo dungeon you've done is Shattered Throne, you might want to brush up on some other dungeons first, and if you are not familiar with some of the builds I just spoke about, please educate yourself or practice them first. Or you can just jump headfirst into the deep end. I'm not going to stop you. I'm literally just a YouTube video. Another assumption I'm going to make is that if you own the Dungeon Pass, you probably own the season, which means you have Dragon's Breath, and Dragon's Breath is very good in solo damage situations because while it is dealing damage, you can deal damage with a special weapon, like a fusion, like a sniper. Also, Dragon's Breath has the potential to self-reload. The new Season of the Wish fusion, Scatter Signal, is a fantastic choice with Overflow and Controlled Burst as an example of a special weapon to DPS with. If you don't have that just yet, then whatever the strongest thing you have will probably work just fine. I used Deliverance, the Vow fusion rifle. You could also use Riptide. Snipers also work more on the final boss. Supremacy with the insane crit perk combo of Rewind and 4th times, or All Reliable Succession from Deepstone Crypt works well. However, Sunshot is insanely efficient at killing pretty much everything in this dungeon and has been a super popular choice. If you do want to roll with Sunshot, then you're going to need a new damage weapon, and this is where you're going to bust out the linear fusions, the best one you got. You got Cataclysmic, you got Briar's Contempt from Root of Nightmares, you're looking for Envious Assassin, and Surrounded, and you're looking to keep Surrounded active as much as possible, which shouldn't be the most difficult. The first boss should not take too long to learn on any class, as the fight is very, very basic. This is actually a very good fight to practice your builds on if you are inexperienced. The start will be just messing around, maybe starting to stack some buffs, Banner of War, Restoration, Combination Blow, while you wait for the game to throw you in jail. Escape from jail and start looking for the safest totem to stand next to while killing any enemies nearby and refreshing any buffs you might need to refresh. You are definitely not guaranteed to have both totems be next to each other in this encounter like you are in future encounters, although if their circles do make a Venn diagram on the ground, try to take advantage by standing in the middle of both circles. Getting both totems is not a necessity for success here. Titans on Strand, your damage combo is Tractor Cannon, 1-2 punch shotgun hit, melee melee, shotgun, melee, refresh tractor, pop super, then repeat the first combo when you're out of your super. Keep eyes on your timer, do not pop your super if you're running low on the vulnerability window of the boss. I don't recommend Solar for this fight while you're capable of doing this kind of damage on Strand, but if you are on Solar, honestly, it barely feels like it matters. Start with Syntheseps and then hot swap to Pyrogale when it's damage time, and then you can probably just bonk spam and shoot the boss with conditional finality to kill this guy if you really wanted to. Or Tractor Cannon and bonk him and you just keep going. But just be on Strand. What are you doing? Arc Hunters. You get Combination Blow ×3, and then you start a similar process to Strand Titans. Throw your Gathering Storm at the boss, and then start 1-2 punching. I used Liar's Handshake in this fight. I really don't think you need the invisibility from Assassin's Cowl here at all, so Liar's Handshake just speeds things up. If you do want to do a Star Eater Scales armor swap for your first super, go for it. The only armor hot swapping I'll be talking about is swapping to a 3x reserves chest piece and boots with scavenger on them to stock up on heavy ammo. Otherwise, there's no pop your super and then swap to other gear in the middle of a damage phase stuff in this guide. If you're someone who's already familiar with hot swapping armor during supers, I don't imagine this guide is going to be able to offer you more than you already know, and if you're not familiar, you don't really need to be. Okay, Warlocks. So, Sun Bracers. These really thrive when you have a metric ton of enemies to kill in an encounter, like the final one, and you can chain kills very easily. This encounter has some enemies, but keeping your restoration stacks alive is going to be a chore at best. And that's kind of the main appeal of Sun Bracers, outside of, you know, infinitely throwing grenades. A finisher with Karnstein is going to get you the same amount of restoration stacks, but it's 1,000,000 times easier to activate than Sun Bracers. Otherwise, Dragon's Breath and Effusion is going to be good here. The main thing that sucks for Warlocks is that Well of Radiance does not translate to nearly as much damage as Hunter and Titans are capable of. So things are going to be a little bit slower for y'all in this fight. If there is something here that's going to kill you, it's really just hubris or not being attentive enough to go kill the enemies. This fight is pretty easy as far as recent solo dungeon bosses go, but don't get too complacent because things still hurt and the Scorn can knock you out of the air with that stupid chain gun. Also, not busting yourself out of jail fast enough will result in death. I figure that's implied. The second boss is where the endurance tests begin. Titans. I went to Solar for this. Synthoceps were on the whole time until we got to damage, then I swapped to Pyrogale. If you want to play it safer, Precious Scars, Lorelei, go for it. If you want to stay on Strand and you're familiar with the Navigator infinite melee combo build with that, feel free to bust it out, but I don't think that's a very average player accessible build, at least just compared to firing rockets and throwing down a Pyrogale super. Hunters, I stayed on Arc for this, but I think Solar is going to be the more popular choice because of Restoration, and Warlocks, same deal, also with Karnstein. In terms of weaponry for Hunter, I went to Lucky Pants Malfeasance with a Fusion and a Rocket to round things out while I waited for my Lucky Pants cooldown, and if I played my cards right, aka I killed a bunch of enemies during the damage phase on top of hitting a lot of Malfeasance crits, I could get 2 supers within a single damage phase. Titans, this is also possible for you too. I wouldn't rely on this happening most of the time though, it's pretty tough and it's a very tight timing. Solar Hunter, on the other hand, is probably just going to be a lot of Celestial Golden Gun with maybe a Lucky Pants swap, or just Dragon's Breath and a Fusion, or Sunshot and a Linear. Warlocks, same deal, Dragon's Breath and a Fusion, or Sunshot and a Linear. Okay, so I handled this fight as such. As soon as the eyes spawn in, the 6 of them, I kill all of them except one, usually an eye on the right side, as my main totem gathering strategy was done on the left side. The side that you do it on doesn't really matter, and come to think of it, the right side might actually be a bit safer since the boss doesn't have as great of a line of sight on you while you're getting the totems. But recently the chieftain on the right side has been dropping totems like in the floor or off of the cliff, so you need to wait for the chieftain to patrol towards you a little bit first. Either way, whatever side you kill the chieftain on, leave an eye on the opposite side alive until you're ready to start. The middle is going to have some taken acolytes and a one-time spawn of minotaurs. I would kill the minotaurs either right off the rip or after you've stacked some buffs. Just get rid of them ASAP. Then, when you're ready, kill the final eye to spawn chieftains. The goal here is to get 2 totems to spawn for 2 orbs. Chieftains are going to spawn in. Do not kill them right away. You want to let them spawn in a totem first, then kill them so that you have 2. And they'll more often than not be stacked on each other so you can do both at the same time. As soon as I see their animation to spawn a totem, and I confirmed the totem visually, I launched a Dragon's Breath rocket or Malfeasance shots with Lucky Pants. Biting Cold starts when this first totem is spawned in most of the time. Ideally, you have no Biting Wind stacks when you start gathering the totems, so chill in the fire until it's time to move. Is it possible to get 4 totems in a single storm phase? Yes. Do I think the majority of people are going to be able to do this with any sort of consistency? Probably not. I did not bother. I aimed for 2 every time. Feel free to try. I would not stress yourself out. After those first 2 orbs spawn in, you can either dunk them or you can just leave them there. They will not despawn unless you touch them. And if you do touch them, you got 15 seconds to do something with them. Then You're just going to run it back, do the same thing. The only thing to note is that Scorn Raiders with sniper rifles are going to spawn in after one of these phases. 2 Scorn Raiders per side. These guys are worth getting rid of. All the other enemies in the arena are going to be respawning pretty much constantly. You will very rarely be able to have everything dead at once, so don't worry about trying to do that. So, you do another wave. Now you got 4 orbs. Cool. Kill another 5 out of 6 eyes, leaving 1 up on the side that you do not plan to start damage from. I went front right, back left, front left. I don't think the order of the torches really matters too much. Clear as much trash as you can, but again, you're going to have enemies on the field, and Taken Thrall will spawn in towards the beginning of the damage phase anyway, so be ready to deal with them. Titans, I swap to Pyrogale before damage. I slap the boss with my super, and then I go to town with Dragon's Breath and Rockets. If you do plan on bonking the boss for Radiant, which I do recommend, do it at the very beginning. Hammer, then super, then Dragon's Breath. I lost a flawless run because I rocketed, bonked, and then I ran in for my hammer, and I died to the rocket that was attached to the boss. Please be careful with Dragon's Breath. You're just going to drift from fire to fire, use the Thrall for sunspots, and go, go, go. Hunters, I threw my super at the boss and immediately went to Malfeasance for a full magazine's worth of damage with Lucky Pants. Reload, swap weapons, and then I started clearing out Thrall with melees and dodges. Once all the Thrall were clear, I got some distance. Rockets are flying. I used a hothead with tracking and explosive light in between Lucky Pants procs. Try to keep tabs on Lucky Pants timers as much as possible, but with only 4 buff slots, it might get a little bit lost. Just try to keep eyes as much as possible. Rotate from plate to plate, getting in Lucky Pants procs as they come up. You might start to run into some danger by plate 3. If you use the order that I went in, you should have some Scorn that you can punch to kill and heal with. You could also do Dragon's Breath instead. I imagine Solar Hunters might be doing that. Warlocks, let the rockets fly. Fusion spam, same concept as before, rotating from plate to plate, not too complicated. Just don't let the Thrall overwhelm you, especially if you're on Karnstein, and take time to kill Acolytes if they happen to be around you. It is not worth dying to try to sneak in 1 extra rocket while a bunch of things are shooting at you. Ammo should be plentiful, and if it's not, you can farm enemies until you have enough ammo. It should not be a huge concern. Be sure to hot swap to Scav and Reserve mods to pick up and hold more ammo than you normally could. After that damage phase, rinse repeat until dead. So, what is going to kill you here? Number 1, the boss beaming you. Not because of the damage, maybe sometimes, but because of the knockback. I limited my jumps so much here. I basically only single jumped. I took the stairs. I was feet on the ground as much as humanly possible. I know it goes against all instincts, but this is a long fight and you need to minimize chances for death. Number 2 is going to be the storm, and this will be because you're not paying attention. Pay attention to the storm. Pay attention to the debuffs. Also, slide or single jump up staircases here. Trust. Number 3 is probably going to be the big chieftains. These can be easily avoided by just making sure you have some cover because they do hurt pretty bad. Number 4 is forgetting about the Scorn Raiders with the snipers. Please try to remember that they spawn after every storm phase. Number 5 is probably dying during a damage phase to either the boss getting too close or the Scorn just killing you or something like that. Most often it was the boss for me, but this was mostly happening on Arc Hunter where I didn't have restoration. And number 6, Dragon's Breath. Stay away from anything you shoot with Dragon's Breath. Wait for both ignitions. I beg you, be patient with Dragon's Breath. This is a much longer fight. Gonna run you about 25-30 minutes or so. I got pretty close to a 3-phase on my Titan with seasonal perks, but realistically, it's gonna be somewhere in the 4 to 7 phase range, depending on your damage. There is one platforming section after this boss that is quite scary, and that's in the Blight Room. But a lot of the danger of this room can be avoided by hugging the right side wall, especially in the second half. There are a decent amount of ledges to walk on to completely avoid all the spinning rocks, but there is one ledge in the first half on the right side wall that does break. If you land and immediately jump and keep moving, you'll be fine. But if you're paranoid about this rock, just check the route that I took. Also, There will be some combat sections here, but the last one before the stairs to the final boss is the scariest. There is zero rush here. Please kill everything. I mean, you literally have to. And please stay safe. This is not the spot to die. Final boss time. This fight is not as long as you think, but it is still pretty strenuous. There are a couple of times to have a break, which we'll talk about. On every class, I went Dragon's Breath and Succession with Callous Mini Tool as my primary. Every single setup ran this. Could you do Briar's Contempt, Cataclysmic, any good linear fusion with Sunshot instead? Yes, I just liked Dragon's Breath here, and pretty much all of you for the next 7 months, very statistically likely to have Dragon's Breath as well. No grinding, no raids, nothing. I didn't even have the catalyst for Dragon's Breath. Titans, you are going solar. No strand unless you're willing to learn and perfect the Navigator infinite melee combo setup, which I'm, again, not going to recommend for this guide. Hunters, I swapped off of Arc and I went to Solar, Celestial Nighthawk. It is some of the freest damage that you are going to get. Warlocks, now is when I put on the Sun Bracers and went absolutely ballistic. I will say that Warlock was too efficient at times, and I had to purposefully leave some stuff alive to continue to chain Sun Bracers procs and restoration. The fight starts with a lot of Scions spawning in, followed by a couple of Wizards shortly after. Let me be clear about these Wizards right now. I don't care how much restoration you have, you treat these Wizards with respect, because they can and will kill your run if you don't. Be careful around them, be careful charging at them, or you try to nuke them down instantly. As for Scions, avoid letting the Scions gang up on you, especially you Titans. You're not invincible anymore, and a bunch of Scions meleeing you at the same time is going to hurt really bad. After the Wizards, the only thing that triggers the next phase are killing all 6 eyes next to the boss. I would recommend killing some of them to start, but then if you need to do anything else, farm ammo, farm super energy, do it before killing all of the eyes. If you are going to do ammo pickups, be sure to use scav and reserve armor swaps. You are going to want that ammo for later, and I'm mainly talking about power ammo here. Special ammo should be plentiful. Once the eyes are dead, you're going to have more Scions spawn in, plus the 2 Chieftains and the Hex Drinker shortly after. Ideally, you are letting the Chieftains spawn in a totem and then killing them immediately, but this is not always possible. You are not going to get 4 totems every single time, and I think if you're trying to get 4 totems every time, you are going to stress yourself out. You should try for a minimum of 2, 3 is the ideal, 4 is a bonus. How you kill the Chieftains depends on your setup. Titans. Make sure you have Roaring Flames ×3 going into this Chieftain phase. I would bonk one of them for a good amount of damage and then hit the other with a Dragon's Breath rocket. As long as you place the rocket somewhat near the Chieftain, they should die or be very weak. I would wait for the first Chieftain that I bonked to drop a second totem, and then I would kill with my hammer to try for a twofer. Then, whatever the last Chieftain dropped totem-wise, I tried to grab that as well. I personally got fed up with trying to keep both Chieftains to double drop totems, and they were causing me a lot of issues when I kept one alive, so I just said, screw it, I'll get 3 total totems, and that'll be good enough for me, which it was. Hunters, you're going to handle this in a very similar way, it's just that you don't have a hammer to get free damage on the Chieftains, so a Gunpowder Gamble Grenade is a good start. You can burn a sniper 2 on this guy if you want, or you can just get 2 totems and be done with it. If you're on Nighthawk, getting past the HP threshold of the boss should not be a huge problem with a golden gun, a rocket, and a few snipes. Warlocks, if you're on Sun Bracers, I procced it on a Scion, then I threw 2 grenades per Chieftain. If I threw them accurately, this was often enough to deal very heavy damage, if not outright kill them. In my mind, I would rather kill the Chieftains early and miss out on an extra totem than run out of time and panic dealing with the Hex Drinker. Launch a rocket if you really think you need it. I tried to dump my Hex Drinker debuff around the 5 to 7 second mark because by the time I crossed to the other side for the other totems, most of the time the Hex Drinker would die on the way there, but not all the time. Do not risk this debuff just to get an extra totem. Get out. This brings us to DPS. Elitist Datto gonna step in here for an interlude real quick. So, apparently, the blights that cover the platforms that you would think would prevent you from progressing to the next area would kill you. They do not. They barely even hurt you. So hunters, mainly looking at you here, you can just leave to the next floor early and do your damage from up there if you want, if you're quick enough. My question is, why are these not kill volumes, or at the very least areas that you cannot physically walk or jump on? Like, they're literally just for show. I would love to know why, one, you can walk on these, and two, why they don't kill you immediately. Interlude over. Titans. I waited for a wave of Scions to spawn in before doing DPS. They usually spawn at the same time as DPS starts, but sometimes they're a little early, and if they are, you gotta leave some alive. I bonk one for a sunspot and my buffs, and then I just stand in the sunspot or somewhere near it and go to town on the boss, and I pretty much ignore all the other Scions. Now, I'm not saying this is a foolproof plan, though. If things get too hot, bail, or just kill the Scions quickly, although you shouldn't have to terribly often. Scions are either going to run up to you and then die in the sunspot, or they won't be able to out-DPS your healing. The boss, however, hurts really bad, so move around a little bit, I guess. Hunters, I pretty much just said it. Golden Gun, Rocket, Snipes, be safe. You should hit the threshold almost every time unless you only get one totem. You may start your damage phase as you're losing your restoration. Just keep eyes on your buffs as you enter the damage phase. Warlocks, you should have a Well of Radiance every single time you do a damage phase, assuming you're on Well, which I assume you are. So, drop that sucker right in the middle and do your thing. Try to get a Sunbracers proc on the Scions as they spawn in to throw some grenades at the boss to help reload your Dragon's Breath. Getting used to the timing of when it'll reload, or just listening for the reload noise, is really important to keep up damage. Keep in mind that you can shoot the Dragon's Breath rocket off of the boss if you're sniping. So if possible, try to place the rocket outside of the crit zone so you don't accidentally hit it. I know it seems crazy, but it happened to me often enough for me to mention it here. After damage is over, clear any remaining enemies and then do some scavenger and reserve swaps to restore your power ammo if there's any power ammo around. There is zero rush to progress to the next floor. Take your time here. You gotta go to the bathroom? Find a corner to hide in, go to the bathroom. This is where you take your breather. The enemies can still hit you if they have line of sight though, so don't just go AFK in the middle or anything. But the longer you wait to progress up to the next stage, the more hostile of an area you will enter when you progress there. I think the only other thing that I need to mention are the blights that spawn in that leave that pool on the ground. These do a little bit of AoE damage. They can also boop you into the air. However, even though they don't hurt that badly, I would still try to get rid of them, especially in the hotspot areas that you're going to be in, because the combination of these and Scions is what can be lethal. Repeat this process 2 more times on the next 2 areas to get to the top floor. When you finish the 3rd damage phase on the 3rd floor, you can again take your time. The fight will not progress until you physically move up to that top level. You can even go to the lower floors to grab more ammo. You might be able to wait for your super for all I know. The top floor is a little bit hectic. The eyes are shooting, the boss is shooting, but assuming you're on solar, you should have some healing capabilities with your healing grenade. You can also just run back and forth a lot. You can abandon ship if you need to. There is some wiggle room. I tried to stay on the platforms the whole time just as an example of what it looks like, and it got a little dicey, but it's manageable. From here, you are just dumping all ammo possible. Dragon's Breath should be igniting and killing the eyes to extend the damage phase. Give yourself buffs whenever possible with melee attacks. Keep moving if things get too painful. Use as much cover as possible. For what it's worth, I never died during this part of the fight in every single attempt that I put in across every class. It's basically the one spot that I didn't die. So it's not impossible or anything. Burn through all your ammo, or at least most of it, and you'll reset back to the ground floor, and you're going to repeat this process until you hit Final Stand. When it comes to Final Stand, I would highly recommend having enough ammo to deal with Final Stand. How much is too much ammo? You can take a guess. Be nearly full ammo. In this run, I pushed things on my Titan because I thought I could maybe eke out a win with the ammo that I had, and I was not even remotely close. Apparently, if you go to the back of this final stand area, the eyes will not shoot you. I cannot confirm that myself, but I would recommend swapping to a long distance weapon and just plinking the boss down from the opposite side of where the boss is. If you jump off of the final stand area, the only reliable way back up is to switch to strand and switch to grapple, and then grapple back up. And even then, it's a little close. The boss will become immune if there are too many eyes guarding, and it's tough to take them down from far away. You can avoid all of this by just making sure you have some ammo. So if you're getting really close to final stand and you don't have a lot of ammo, wait it out, farm ammo, and then go for it. Don't put yourself in this situation. Just do an extra cycle. This fight's a tough one. It might be tougher than Samuma from Ghost of the Deep in certain ways. It's fast, it's hectic, there's a lot to keep track of. I would definitely get some practice in. This is not a fight that I want to improvise. Feel free to leave tips for your fellow players out there if you have any more specific advice that you would like to give. I tried to keep things as average player friendly as possible, but stuff obviously slips through the cracks every now and then. If you enjoyed the video or if it helped you out, a like on the vid for the algorithm gods would be dope. Thank you very much for watching, and good luck in there.